Okay guys, time to go over the first lesson. Before we start, I just want to give you guys a little reminder. I want you to remember what we mean by a mathematical expression. Okay, so just to give some examples, things like 2x plus 7, 3 over 7 x squared minus 2y, even something like 12. These three things right here are all expressions. The big thing to remember is that it doesn't start with an equal sign. Doesn't start with an equal sign. Okay? So if someone shows you one of these expressions and they say to solve it, you can't solve it. You can't solve for x. There's nothing to make true. Okay, now I'm pretty sure you've learned that, but just as a reminder. So the first section we want to cover is 1.1 in your book, and that's called linear equations. Okay, and these tend to be the simplest types of equations to solve. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to define equation. An equation is a statement that two expressions are equal. We're talking about the expressions above. Okay, so some examples. 2x squared plus 7 equals 5x. Note the equal sign. We could also look at something like 3x equals 2x minus 4. So the whole idea is, when you see one of these equations, usually you want to solve them. So let's define what we mean by a solution. Values for the variable that make the equation true. Okay, so we want to find a value of x, for example, that would make this true, a value of x that would make this statement true. And that's what we mean when we say to solve it. Now specifically for linear equations, we want to talk about ones that involve one variable. So linear equation in one variable. Now one thing you'll notice I'll do here is the very important stuff, just like you'll see in the math books, I'm going to box. Okay, this is going to be my first such box. Okay, so I want to talk about a linear equation in one variable. An equation that can be written in the form. Okay, so now I'm going to give the sort of general form of these guys. AX plus B equals 0, where A and B are real numbers. Okay, so this is our first sort of box part, the first important part here. Okay. The thing I want you to really notice here is, yes, we could have AX equal to negative B if we move the B over, that's fine. We're just saying, hey, we can write it in this form. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly in this form, as long as we can write it in this form. Also notice, even though I don't write the exponent, we all know, of course, that this x is to the first power. That's the key for it being a linear equation. Okay? So let's look at some examples. Okay. So how about linear equations first? Okay. So remember, the key is that whatever variable we use in the equation, usually x, has to be to the first power. So for example, 2x minus the square root of 5 equals 0. This is a linear equation in one variable being x, that's to the first power, and I even wrote it in this nice little form here. Okay. Now it doesn't necessarily have to be in that exact form. We could have it looking something like this. 3 over 7x equals 10. Notice if I subtracted 10, I could get into this sort of form. So these are two examples of linear equations. Okay. Now, some examples of nonlinear equations in one variable. Okay, so let's take a look at this. How about something like this? The square root of x plus 7 equals 9. Well, why doesn't that work? Well, remember, the square root of x is the same as saying x to the 1/2. That's not to the first power like in our definition. Okay, so that doesn't work for a linear equation. Or something like this. 2 over x equals -3. Why doesn't this work? Well, this right here, if we remember our algebra, this is 2x to the -1. Once again, this isn't to the first power. Finally, we could look at something like this. 3x squared minus 4 equals 2x. Okay? What's the problem here? Well, there's the problem. It can't be linear if x is raised to the second power. Okay? So in this section, we're going to mainly focus on linear equations, and we're going to worry about nonlinear equations later. And that does it for the first part of this section.